To discuss Fox News contributor Gerard Murdoch, who is also contributing editor to the National Review. Beverly Hallberg, president of District Media Group. Katie Freites, managing editor of Olympic Media and editor of the Daily Caller. And back with us, Katrina Pearson. DeRoy, you don't like this deal. You're very disappointed over this.
I think this is a real major lost opportunity. Excuse my voice, I've had a cold for the last few days. But the real sickness we see is this huge amount of spending, $300 billion increase, up 14%. That's inflation times 7. And this spending might have been manageable, or maybe you could accept it if they'd had some structural reforms. For example, the penny plan, which is reduce spending by 1% every year for 6-7 years, then you have a balanced budget. Here's an idea. Have either Ernst & Young or Price & Waterhouse, these major accounting firms, come in and audit every single agency, find duplication, find waste, and eliminate it. $310 billion in programs in the budget for which there's no authorization. The legal authorization is run out. They're illegal programs. How about scrap some of that? The Republicans could have had any of these things implemented and didn't. And unfortunately, we got a lot of spending and virtually nothing in terms of structural reforms. Very disappointing. I
understand the urgency and the critical need to bolster our military. And I think many people don't realize just how awful it is and how bad, decrepit it's become with respect to readiness. But did the Republicans give away too much?
I think so, and while I think Senator Schumer lost the first government shutdown battle, I think he won this one because they got everything they wanted. Even when you take a look at military spending, I agree we want to make sure our troops have what they need when they fight for our freedoms overseas. But the concern, even with this budget in reference to the military, is that much of it looks like it's going to go to contractors, not necessarily military personnel. So I'm concerned about that. And when you take a look at the reality of this, you're talking about a 13% increase in spending, which is the second largest spending increase in the past decade, second only to the Obama stimulus. So I just want to know, where are the Republicans on this one? They seem to be attacking spending only when it's a Democrat in office and not when it's a Republican.
Yeah, that's a great point, Katie. It looked like Rand Paul was like that old movie, I think it was a Glenn Ford, and the guy was like, waiting for everybody else to show up, and it was just him.
He had a couple supporters there in the background.
Oh, did he? Okay, I just saw tumbleweed. I'm sorry.
But I mean, they're absolutely correct. It is incredibly worrisome that the deficit, that it's blowing up. We haven't done anything. Republicans just threw a bunch more money at the wall, and a lot of it's critical, of course, for opioid addiction, that epidemic that's going on, helping out families with babies born with addiction through their mothers. That's all excellent, but there's been no reforms that are critically needed because the government can't continue on like this forever. But at the same time, this wasn't really a win for Democrats at all. Nancy Pelosi had her big shtick about don't vote for this because it doesn't do anything for immigration or dreamers. But then she turns around and goes, oh, but guys, vote your conscience. And so you had 70-some Democrats in the House voting for this. So it doesn't make her look good. If I were Nancy, I probably wouldn't be doing any town halls anytime soon.
All right, by the way, the movie is High Noon for anyone younger than 50. It's worth Netflix. Check it out on Netflix. Katrina, after our last segment, someone hit me on Twitter and said what we're looking at is not economic populism, but economic Americanism. Is that something that perhaps we could call this?
Absolutely, Charles. As I said, this is a bigger picture situation, and I understand things of the past tend to creep into everyone's mind, but this is not an administration like any other administration. The priorities of this president are very different than those before him. And I will say, it's not to say it's too late to put any of those structural reforms in place. Who's to say they're not already working on doing that? Some of these things are just things that cannot happen overnight. Like I said before, there are not 60 votes in the Senate, and also, the Democrats didn't get everything that they wanted because DACA is why they shut the government down the last time. They didn't get it, and that's a massive win for Republicans and President Trump.
So, real quickly, Beverly, how does this play out in the midterm elections? Who does this give the edge to as of right now?
Well, if people are following it closely and still want Republicans to drain the swamp, this doesn't help them at all. My concern with Republicans is they looked at the tax reform victory and thought that was going to be enough. But what we're not hearing about is cutting spending. I want to know when we're going to cut entitlement spending. We're not hearing about that. And also, something that's been taken off the table is health care reform. So I actually think voters are going to be upset about this because they are smart enough to know that spending like this affects their children and their grandchildren. And Republicans have been saying for years that they want to fix that for children and grandchildren, but they didn't do it with this.
Yeah, I think the idea is to grow the economy in a way that pays down the debt and then tackle it in a different way on the back end. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks.
Thank you.